Hello, welcome to this Photoshop CS6 tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to explore more of the 3D options in CS6. This is Photoshop CS6 Extended. You will need the extended version to follow on to this tutorial. So as I say, we're going to cover some more of the basic options in this program for 3D. First thing we're going to cover is depth of field. So I've opened up this document. I'm going to first turn it into a 3D postcard. To do that, you come to 3D, new mesh from layer, postcard, and that turns it into a flat 3D object. You can demonstrate this by getting our orbit tool and moving it around like so. Let's put it to the side like that and come over to our 3D properties panel, which is over here. I've also got the 3D panel out. And you'll come down here and you'll have depth of field, or DOF as it's sometimes referred to. Now the depth refers to the amount of blur that we apply, so let's put that onto 1, and the distance determines whereabouts on that 3D object the blur is. So if I move it up, you can see that the blur is quite close to us here. If I take it back down, you can see that the blur moves towards the furthest point of that 3D object. So you can see how you could get some nice effects from that. Let's move on. I've got a document open. It's 1000 by 1000 pixels, and I've created a new layer. I'm going to leave the new layer blank. I'm going to get the gradient tool. Now Photoshop allows you to create a 3D object from a depth map. Now basically, to create a depth map you need to apply a gradient or some color to a layer. Now the best way to explain this is to think that the 3D object will be based on the level of grey within that depth map. So I'm going to create a gradient. I'm going to make it black, white, black, and I'm going to get a linear gradient, and I'm going to hold down shift and just apply it vertically down this document. Now if I then come to 3D new mesh depth map plane, and this is a single plane, you'll see it will bend this layer depending on the levels of grey in that depth map. So where it's white, you can see it in this bend here, here, and where it's black, you can see there's not been much bending at all. So basically you can create a two-sided plane, so that would be, well, let's do it same as before, but there'll be two sides to it. Or you can create a cylinder and a sphere, which will probably, you can also, you could do this without actually having anything on a layer, create shapes. So we can come to mesh presets and you can create a cube, or you can create any of the different options here. Let's go for a soda can. So there we have our soda can. Now let's stick with this soda can and let's change up some of the properties. Let's say we wanted to add a reflection or an environment, maybe some shine, and maybe some writing on it. So how do we do that? Well, if we come to the 3D panel and come down to where it says soda, which is the name of the object, you can see it's made up of two materials. There's the cap, which is this part on top and on the bottom, and you can see that there's the label, which is all around, so it's the side of the soda can. Let's stay on, let's go to cap material, and we can come down to the diffuse, or indeed into the layers panel, and here it says cap material. We can double click on that, we'll open it. Let's just fill that with black, alt delete, click on the X to close it, save it yes, and it's turned our caps black. So the same goes for the label material. We can double click on the label material underneath the 3D layer in the layers panel to open up that. Now we want to add some writing to the side of this can. I'm just going to add the word can in red, but to know where to put it can be a bit tricky, so Photoshop allows you to create some painting overlays. You come to 3D, let's create a new layer first, 3D, create painting overlay, and you can create a wireframe, or you can create normals or shaded. Let's go with shaded, and let's put this there, turn off them layers, get our text tool. Now if you look closely at this shaded painting overlay, you can see here the shape of part of the can. So if I was to flip this round, you'll see that this is the top of the can, so we can determine by that we want to put our word in there, but we also want to turn it round. If we was to flip this image round, we would actually have this the right way up with regards to the can. If you see this side being the top of the can, one side, two sides, and then the word cans. Let's close it, save it, get a move tool, and there you can see the word can. Lighten it up so we can see it a bit better, and I'm going to come to the label material, and to that I want to add a reflection. Now there's two different ways you could do this. You can add a reflection as a static reflection on the can, and you can do this by adding a texture to the reflection property. So we can go load texture, and let's choose maybe this one here, open, and you can see that it's created this reflection, and as I say, as we turn and move this, it just stays static. I think we can do better than that though, so I'm going to remove that texture by clicking on it and go in remove texture, and I'm going to come down to environment, and I'm going to go load texture. Let's load this texture here, and I'm going to take the shine out and turn the reflection up, take the bump down, and now as I move this can, it interacts with the environment, so the environment is being reflected of it, and it looks more realistic. You can also add the bump maps, so I'll show you what that is. Let's remove our environment and take our reflection down, come to the bump, and this time we're going to go new texture, make sure it's the same size as our document, 1000 by 1000, click OK, and then we're going to come to bump and we're going to go to edit texture, and then to this I'm going to go filter, noise, add noise, make it monochromatic, so black and white, click OK, close it, save it, and then turn the bump up, and now you will see that it's got texture to it based on the bump map, which is the document we created here. One tip when you're creating these bump maps, reflection maps, is to create them with smart filters or as a smart object, so they're easily changeable, not like I've done here for demonstration purposes. Other things to take in mind are when you've finished editing your object, you want to render it. The render can now be found under 3D render, and that will render it. To stop it, just press the space bar. It can take quite a while depending on your machine. Another thing is you can also create a cross section. Let's get rid of that bump map. Let's just remove the texture altogether, and click on the scene option, choose cross section, and you can, and basically that will create a slice across your object, depending on these settings here. So the opacity just controls the opacity of the slice, so the visual representation of the slice. So if I move it to the side, this here, it will get darker and lighter. This plane, you can choose to see the visual representation of that slice or not. We'll leave it as so, and then you can offset it like so. The tilt basically tilts that plane, and then use the offset to go through it. And you can choose to slice it in the Y axis, so cross like that, and we could get that so it's a bit more straighter, and then offset it like so. Or in the Z axis, so it goes from forward to back, back to forward, like so. This can create some quite cool animations. If we come to, there's loads more to talk about. We can talk about lights and the different lights and different options there. We can talk more about materials and how to create materials. I think I'll show you that quickly. Let's say that we wanted to put a new material on this label. So here you see we have some default materials. Let's pick one, this black, or maybe this red. But what about if you wanted to create your own material? Well, you can do that. Let's create a new document, and let's press D to get our default forward and background colors. Turn this into a material. We want to first turn it into a 3D object, so we're just going to turn it into a postcard. And then on the 3D panel we'll come to the material itself, which is the background, and because that's what the layer is called, background. And up here we're gonna click on this little flyout, choose new material, and we'll just call this demo MT. Click OK, and now that material appears as the last material in your material options. If we go back to this document, we can apply that material to this can now, like so. Until then, thank you for taking the time to watch.